My name is Clayton, also known as George Pig, and I manage the community here at Refold. Today, we are joined by Sal, a lawyer from DC and a longtime French learner. Join us as we talk about his strategies learning French and how much he's been able to achieve since switching to immersion learning. All right, and Sal, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, so Sal, thank you for coming on to the Refold podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, do you want to introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do? What is your history with languages? And what is your relationship to the Refold community?
Yeah, so my name is Sal, and I live in DC. I'm a lawyer here, like most people. And my history with language learning, I've always had a passion and an interest in language learning. I remember trying to teach myself Spanish. Then in high school, when we finally was able to choose languages, I started with French. I took 4 years of French. Then I went to college and took a year of French. But I always felt my French didn't improve in any way. I was just always just at the beginner level. I never felt like I was able to, interact with people, read things, or stuff like that. So I kind of left French alone. End up picking up Brazilian Portuguese and studying that for a long time. I would say about 5 years. And once again, I feel as if I could not get past that beginner level where I could comfortably kind of interact with people and also interact with native materials. Then I ended up leaving Brazilian Portuguese alone, and I dabbled in a couple of other languages, including Mandarin at one point, German, and most recently Hebrew. But of course, my first language love, French, I came back to it and decided to really learn it. And I decided to learn it because my partner and I we're going to the Olympics next year, and we're going to stay over there about a month. So I do want to be very proficient in it. And also, my job is allowing me to go over there and open an office. So I'll probably be over there longer than a month. It'll probably most likely be a year. So I wanted to be able to really interact with natives, like I said before, and actually live in the country and live in the language. Um, so I ended up finding Refold. Um, I think it was even called Mass Immersion Approach when I first found it. It was during the beginning of the
Oh, it was
pandemic.
MIA. So
Yes,
you found this geez, it's been a couple of years now.
yeah. So I was there. I wouldn't say from the inception, but before Refold was here. I remember I was dabbling in Japanese at the beginning of the pandemic. That was like my pandemic project. And everyone in the Japanese learning community was talking about AJ, AJ, AJ. So I ended up finding AJ, and I love Kazumoto, and and what he done by pushing immersion-based learning to the forefront. But his website was not the easiest to navigate for me,
It
and
was not.
um, and once I was starting to learn more about AJ, I came across MIA, and it was just such a easier way for me to interpret the information. So I got really active in the mass immersion approach subreddit and really trying to do the immersion based program. Honestly, I got burnt out with learning Japanese and with the immersion approach and kind of just took a break from language learning. And I most recently got back into um, learning languages May of last year, May of 2022. And I decided to choose French, like I said. I was doing the refold method for about 6 months, and I didn't feel sure that I really understood the program, like understood the immersion kind of approach. And so when you all brought out the coaching, I decided to hop on and join. And so that's how I kind of really got integrated into the Refold community through the coaching program.
All right. So, yeah, I didn't realize that you had been around since MIA in terms of like your interaction with the immersion learning community. And I don't think you're. I think it's a pretty common thread among people in the like the Refold community is like not starting with Japanese, but doing some Japanese. I feel like that's sort of the gateway for a lot of
Mm,
people because of how big AJAT and MIA were for the Japanese learning community.
yes, yes, I do find that most of the people who use immersion based learning for their language learning usually are into Eastern languages or Eastern Asian languages such as Japanese or Korean.
Yeah, and um, I think you also you did some of the coaching. You went through the
Hmm.
program, and I think you were one of the first, or if not the first, French learner. And it's really interesting to see that grow because we now have a little sort of, I don't know, cohort of French learners. You've got some fellow French learners who are either going through or have gone through the program.
Yes, I was definitely the first one. I think you and I were trying to, decide what tools would be best for me together. That was a great experience. But now, seeing that, although I was kind of the quote unquote guinea pig for French, I really saw the program for French mature. And I do think it has helped, the people who have followed behind me that are, doing coaching with Refold.
Yeah, I think it's nice having uh, a cohort, a group, because I learn a lot from clients. So I recently found out that Yomi-chan has a fork for French. So like that's really good. It replaces sort of like dictionaries, which was the tool I was recommending before. And like um obviously since I'm not a French learner, understanding different content, recommendations and things has been really beneficial. Now, what's really fun to me is you're very active in our little alumni community of people who have gone through the course.
Yes,
So you're very active, which it's nice. It's nice to sort of have a community of graduates. So one of my biggest, I don't want to say complaint, that sounds a little negative. One of my biggest concerns with communities like Refold, where people join to learn a skill, and oftentimes when they learn the skill, they move on. So there's not like a huge amount of people taking on little Padawans, right? Because they got what they came for and they're good and they leave. And I think that's a shame, because I think having people who've done their, been there, done that is really beneficial.
I definitely agree that I do think it's important to stick around after graduating because there could be small questions that someone could have um, that you couldn't help answer. I imagine that it has been a lot on you and Vanessa being, the two main coaches to take on all of these students and making sure you're like reaching out to them, helping them, answering all their questions. And I think having, the alumni network will alleviate some of that stress because people can be like, hey, I'm really unsure of this. Have you ever experienced this before? And I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, especially when a French learner has reached out to me about something, I've had that feeling or I've experienced that too, and they just want confirmation that it's okay. So I do think it's very important to give back to the community. But I think I'm truly really active in the community because it's a constant motivation for me. Um, I do feel as if I did not have the alumni um, Discord channel, that I would have fallen off of my routine and my schedule. And honestly, I have fallen off here and there for like a week or two because life got crazy. But I always come back because I feel as if people, reach out to me and ask like, "Hey, you haven't been active. Is everything okay?" And I feel really supported. Um, and as you know, language learning is so lonely sometimes that it's just really nice to like go to people and talk about your frustrations or your loneliness or have people
Language
to
learning
support you.
language learning is surprisingly lonely, especially the way we go about it with immersion learning, where like we watch a lot of content, we read a lot of books. I know that you read a lot of books. You constantly are devouring books. Um, but we're not like the other types of language learners who are constantly out there outputting, right? Like making friends on, um, italki or Hello Talk or any of those like language exchange apps. So it can definitely be lonely.
Yes, yes.
And you are you I think are one of the first clients to have actually gotten to meet some of the other like graduates. I think you recently met up with another graduate in person and had a good time.
Yes, yes. I did meet a fellow graduate who lives in my area, and it was a good time. We went out to brunch. We brought our partners, and really got to connect on like our language learning. Although we she's learning Japanese and I'm learning French, there are still things that no matter what language you're learning, the struggles are similar, such as listening, or being motivated, or finding the next, thing you want to immerse in. Just talking to other people about that is for me really nice and exciting and fun.
Yeah, I think I would like to see more of that. I would like to see, more Refold meetups. I don't know if that's something that could be organized because, we're such a global community, but
Mhm.
it's cool. I actually tried to get Bree to go to that meetup because she's only a few hours away from you guys, but she did not. She's not a very, she likes to stay home. She's not a people person. Um, but yeah, definitely jealous.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna
So,
get Bree out. I'm gonna get Bree out in here soon. That's my goal for
yeah,
2023.
you definitely should. And I don't know, any I don't know, any DC people out there, let me know. I'll hook you up with Sal and you guys can meet up.
Yes, yes, I'm more than happy to meet up with other refolders.
So after you graduated, you kind of got really hit with dabblitis. So like I know that you had to go to Israel for a little bit and you were like going hard on Hebrew, meeting with a tutor. Um, and how is that going? So your French, you're still doing French. I see your progress every day. You're still reading books and you are killing it with Clothes Master, but you also have these dabbling urges. How is that going? How is that sort of wanting to go and learn other languages when you're still not totally satisfied with your French?
You know, it's like fighting an addiction. Like every day I want to get up and just dabble in a different language. And I have to be like, no, Sal, no, 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 focus on French. So
Those like
it's been really
dopamine
hard.
hits you get, those dopamine hits you get from those like the early stages where everything is a huge achievement is so addicting.
Yes, it is very, very addicting. And I just really like to learn how other cultures think about things. And the way to do that is through language, because every our whole perception of the world is due to the language we speak. Um, and that really fascinates me, but it's been really hard to like hold off on those urges. Like even today, I was like, oh, I kind of want to learn some German. And I'm just like, no, Sal, just continue reading in French, listening in French, and one day you'll be able to move on to another language. And I'm just trying to keep telling myself to like just research different languages. So when your French is at the level you want it to be, Sal, then you'll know the language you want to move to.
An interesting strategy might be to dabble in other varieties of French. So you're sort of focused on like metropolitan French, right?
Hmm.
Um, but there's Francophone Africa, there's Louisiana French, there's New England French, there's you know you got New Brunswick, you've got Quebec, you've got all of these other places that would be kind of interesting to get into.
Yes, no, I've definitely thought about that. And one of my goals for 2024 is to at least read a book from every Francophone country. Um, to understand the cultural aspects of how they may view things through the way they use French. But no, that's a great idea, and I'll probably try that to
Where
stop my
you're
urges.
from the Gulf Coast, right?
Yeah,
Whereabouts?
So I'm originally from Mississippi.
Okay. Did Mississippi? I think Mississippi might have had a variety of French at one point.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
I think they call it. Is it Pawpaw? No, that's Missouri, not Mississippi. Okay. Um, that's a little bit of the wrong M state. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Um,
no problem.
but I do think there is some French in the Gulf Coast. I think like historically Mobile, Alabama. That's like historically a French settlement. And I tell you, it's really interesting. I recently gave another client who's doing French. I gave him a link to a radio station from Louisiana, just some old Cajun people talking, and I think it's worth getting into. Sort of rather than fight your desire to dabble in a different language, just dabble in a different dialect. I did the same thing with Filipino, where like I got really into Southern Tagalog, which is another dialect, and it's pretty divergent, different grammatical forms, different pronunciation, and I think it can scratch that same itch of dabbling, but you're still improving your French at the same time.
Mm, no, definitely look into that. I just love dabbling.
It's addicting. It really is.
It is.
So regarding your language learning, you read a lot. But what's interesting to me is something I've noticed is you read both native content and like the CEFR graded content. So I don't see too many learners who basically max out our vocab tests like you did, who continue with learner content past like the beginning/intermediate stages. So why do you keep using graded readers? Because I see that you read both graded content and native content. What's your mindset there?
It's a balance for me. Native content is still a little hard for me at times. But reading graded content with it, one keeps me interested in the language and keeps me, immersing longer. But reading graded content is so much easier. Like I get into that vibe stage that Matt spoke about in one of his videos, where it's just comfortable. I feel as if I'm reading in English when I'm reading the graded readers, and that makes me very happy. It allows me to see my progress and to know and to always remind myself that I don't always have to struggle with the language, and I will not always struggle with the language. So it helps my mental sanity dealing with French, just to push myself a little bit, but then I can fall back and still interact with the language at a comfortable level for me.
Sure. So it sort of sounds to me like your graded readers fill the same niche that like kind of taglishy easy books fill for me, where it's just easy. It feels like you're reading English.
Yes.
So you can actually get into a flow state and really do some like um, not intensive, but extensive, I guess, reading.
Yes, yes. I definitely use my graded readers for extensive reading because I usually know like 99% of the words.
Yeah. And another thing I've noticed that sort of makes you stand out among some of the alumni is you are a huge Closemaster fan. So, uh, you, how far are you into the Closemaster Fluency Fast Track deck that teaches you like 20,000 words?
So I do a mixture of their fluency fast track and also their most common words. So right now with their most common words, I'm at the 10,000 most common. And for the fluency fast track, I'm at like 8,000 sentences right now, out of 19,000. And I just really enjoy Closemaster over Anki.
I also enjoy it. I wrote a blog post on it. Um, and I'm delighted that somebody else enjoys Closemaster. So you're at the 10,000 word mark. It's pretty high, you know. I think I think Paul Nation said that native books are around the 9,000 word mark. So you definitely have made some progress. You maxed out our French test recently, which was really nice.
Yeah, I would say that Closed master, like, as you know, I always struggle to be consistent with SRS. I just always found Anchor to be very boring. It's like going to the gym. It just took so much energy just to even open it. And I didn't like it. Like it didn't motivate me. And so when,
Monkey is not the be all end all SRS, and I stand by it. You know,
and
I'm a huge fan of Memrise, for example.
I completely agree with you that it's not end all be all, but when that's why I think really helped me through coaching was like, yeah, there's recommended tools, but there's other things that you can replace that may be more enjoyable for you. Um, and for that, Closemaster was my SRS. I know people in the community may say Anki is more efficient, it's better, it's more customizable. I completely understand that, but also I wanted a program that I would be excited to open up every day and to actually interact with it. Like some days I can do 2, 3 hours of Closemaster and it doesn't feel that stressful to me. Where if I had 100 cards to review an Anki, I would just immediately close it. And I'm like, oh, that's just I'll be overwhelmed. Um,
Right.
so I think one thing is for all the listeners out there, customize the Refold program to work for you. Try different tools and see what you enjoy and do that. Even if it's not the most efficient, quote unquote, way known in the community, as long as you enjoy and are consistent with it, you will improve. And that's what I'm seeing through Closemaster.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's not a dogma, right? You don't have to do Anki. You can use
Mhm.
jpdb.io. You can use Closemaster. You can use Memrise. You can use Mochi. There are all of these. There SRS apps are actually a dime a dozen.
Yes, now
So
they are.
finding yeah, and it doesn't even just have to be that. It's also things like I do not like doing interactive immersion with shows or YouTube or something videos. I prefer to do books for my interactive. And the vanilla refold guide sort of pushes you towards doing stuff with video content. And
Hmm.
a lot of people don't like stopping what they're watching. They find it clunky. It's not really convenient to do interactive on mobile for most languages, like if you're trying to do a video.
Hmm.
Um, so I totally second that. Definitely customize Refold. I someone emailed me recently and was like, "Hey, I love Refold, but I started doing output early, and I do output once a week on italki." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's totally fine. You can early output if you want, if you find it motivating and you enjoy it. I wouldn't stop. Customize Refold. Very few people actually, few successful people." Um, just stick to things without experimenting and making it work, right? It's like tweaking a
Yes.
recipe. You can get a recipe that you like and say, oh, it's a little bit too sweet. And you can remove some of the sugar or cut it with like something like vinegar and change it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, no, I definitely agree. Number one thing, read the guide and know that it is a guide, but customize it to what you like. For example, like you, I like to do my interactive immersion with books. It's easier for me, it's more comfortable for me. And I actually don't like watching TV shows. Well, I don't like watching French TV shows, I'll say that. So my listening is 100% from audiobooks, which I find more, how can I say, dense than the TV counterpart. And I do think it has helped my overall listening improve. But
Yeah, and
that's
speaking
changed. Mhm.
speaking of books, tell me a little bit about French content. What all do you read? What's out there?
So I love crime thrillers in English, and the French love those too. So my favorite French writer is this woman named Fred Vargas. She has this series, this detective book series that I've just been devouring. It's a little hard, and sometimes I have to take a break from her to read something easier in French, like a self-help book. But that's the main person I go to when I'm reading in French, outside of my graded readers, of course.
And I know at one point you were reading a whole bunch of like Stephen King. So do you like horror?
I love horror. I love anything dark, like horror, crime, dark fantasy, things like that.
I also like dark fantasy. One of my biggest pet peeves with content is English has so much good dark fantasy slash horror content. It's hard to compete. It can be hard to compete at times.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And now that I feel as if my French has definitely advanced past what it ever has been. I'm starting to see the cultural differences between French and Americans. So I see what they care about and what we're really good at and what they're really good at. And honestly, America has media on lock. America
Yeah,
has a plethora of media, and it's so much, so many varieties.
we're definitely like a soft power when it comes to media for sure.
Yes, yes, I completely agree.
Um, have you looked at any native like French horror?
Um, yes. So I watched one French TV show on Netflix.
Is
It was
this the is this the one about the she's like a writer or something? She's like a horror writer.
yes, Marianne.
Ma- yes, that one.
Hmm.
So she's like a novelist, right? And then like the characters in her horror novels are also in. It only got one season, I think.
Yes, Netflix love to kill off the good shows.
Okay, so you did Mary Ann on Netflix. Anything else horror? So um, can you see the chat there in the podcast room?
Yes, I can.
So those are two. I didn't actually put it didn't format the way I meant for it to. One second, let me space that out. And my French pronunciation is trash because I don't actually speak French.
Hmm.
So those are two titles there. You want to give those a read?
Yeah, Les lois du ciel et La nuit a dévoré le monde.
Yes. So those are two highly recommended French horror titles that you may be interested in.
Let me make a note of these right quick. Thank you. I'm always interested in new content.
One of my big dreams for the future for Refold is making it easier to share content with people. So like right now we've got like the community docs and we've got like the notions, and they're a little bit clunky. They're not convenient. It would be great if you like watching something or reading something and you could instantly add it to like a database that other refolders could use.
Yes, that would actually be great. And like have the person like kind of describe their level and describe how well they understood it will also be very, very helpful.
For sure. And that's something that will be nice to have. Um, now, let's see. How many books do you think you've actually read in French since you started doing immersion learning?
I looked this up in preparation for um, this call. So I do not know how many books, but I was doing the Lang challenge before Twitter like ended their API access, and I was at 800 pages. So I'm probably at 1,200 pages of reading right now. So that's a good number of books, I would say.
And are you including your audiobooks in that?
No, that's just
Okay.
books I've like read.
Those are books that you've actually read, not okay. And how
Hmm.
about in terms of like audiobooks? How many do you think you've gone through?
Let me go. I don't think Audible will tell me the number of books, but they tell me how long I've listened to it, and I've done 14 days and 20 hours and 21 minutes of listening on my Audible right now. And my Audible only has like one or two English books that I still haven't listened to. So most all of that is French listening.
Oh man. So I know that you recently went to Israel. Have you been to a French-speaking country since you started French?
No, I have not. Well, I take that back. I was in Canada like 3 weeks ago. Um,
Were you in a
so I
French-speaking part?
No, I was in Toronto, but everything was in French and English, and I could read everything comfortably, but no one around me was speaking French.
Yeah, I have not been to Toronto in, geez, almost 2 decades. But I feel like it's pretty thoroughly Anglophone compared to like Ottawa or Montreal or something.
Yes, no, I completely agree. It's definitely the English speaking part.
For me, you cut out
Oh, I said, no, they're definitely just full of English speakers. I'll say that.
for sure. I don't know. That's one of those things that I would like to do. If I were a French learner, I would go all over, definitely North America, but other places too. Like I would check out like French Guiana in South America. I would go to rural Canada, like Northern Ontario, um, Nova Scotia. Like I would definitely make a grand tour. So, I've got family roots in Louisiana,
Hmm.
and about 16 years ago, 14 years ago, 14 years ago, I went to visit the Homa Indians, which at the time were the last majority francophone population in Louisiana. So at the time, like a narrow majority, like 56% or something of the Homa tribe spoke French as their main language. And that was really fun. So, North America has this sort of colonial French history that has sort of fallen to the backside in, the past couple hundred years. Um, but it's definitely really cool to visit these remote francophones, I think, and see their unique sort of colonial um, culture, I guess.
Yes, no, that's very. I definitely would like to see that. That's very interesting. Um, I I've been holding off on going to any French speaking country until I achieve, in my mind, at least a B2 or C1 in listening, just because I want to be very comfortable there. I want to feel and experience the fruits of my years long labor in French the next time I go.
Do you have any plans to take the official C1? I know that you've taken some practice tests and scored C1, but how about the official test?
So I took that practice test to see what my level, because I was going to sign up for the DELF at the end of the year. They have a December administration of the test. But what I'm really concerned about is just making sure that my listening is up to par. I think, my reading is great, of course, because that's what I practice the most. And I can get my writing up to par if I, write constantly. And I do speak 3 or 4 times a week with the tutor. So I do think my skills are improving, but I'm just really worried about listening, and I think they'll bring down my score. So when I tested in C1, I was very shocked. But I think I'm gonna take the B2 test in December. That's my ultimate goal. But I may become more comfortable with the idea of just shooting for the stars and taking the C1 test to see how I do.
Okay. Well, I think B2 is very reasonable. People who don't actually use the CEFR, you see these internet people say, like, oh, I'm B1 in this language, but B2 is actually very competent.
Hmm.
Um, the actual requirements for the CEFR are pretty stringent. So actually being truly B2 is definitely something to write home about, I think.
Yes, yes, no. I definitely agree that B2 is a great level. I do feel as if I'm at a B2, but it would be great to be like a C1. Like I feel as if that's like once you're in the C level or the CEFR, excuse me, um, kind of scale, then you're really impressing people in the language learning community, and that's what I want to do.
So you're doing it for the clout.
Of course, of course.
There's nothing wrong with that. I think the social proofs are important, right? I think that one of your motivating factors for Close Master is topping the leaderboards.
Yes, I'm
Yeah, and
just
there's
naturally
nothing wrong with that.
competitive. So I just love things like that where I can like show off my competency to the world in a way.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's hard, as an immersion learner, we don't have that same social proof, right? Because like we don't go out there and like speak as often with people, and there's no real proof other than saying, "Hey, look at these hours I've read, or look at these words that I've done in my SRS." So I think that leaderboards have a place for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
So when you do eventually get B2, C1, what are your further goals with French? Do you think you're going to take it all the way? Or are you going to give into the dabbling and start collecting some other languages?
Yeah, so my ultimate goal with French, I would love to be at a C1 level, and just go into maintenance mode where I just listen to my audiobooks and I watch and interact with content when I want to instead of kind of doing it on a daily basis, like I'm doing now with my routine, and start dabbling in another language. I'm definitely not going to do another romance language because I just don't want to mess up, the growth I've had in French. But yeah, I'm going to dabble, but it just depends. I have to decide what language, and it depends on when I start.
So you don't think you'll go back to like Portuguese?
I would love to go back to Portuguese, but I'm afraid that it will interfere with my French. I was speaking with Bree earlier this week, and she was telling me how she's starting to confuse Spanish and French, and she's at a C1. Excuse me, Spanish and Portuguese, and she's at a C1 in Spanish herself, and that gave me instant pause. I'm like, oh gosh, it's still going to happen at such a high level. Usually, you hear about the confusion happening with people who are like A2 in a language and start learning another language, but it was jarring for me to hear that she's like at a C1 and was confusing her Spanish and Portuguese.
Yeah, the language interference can be interesting. It's actually one of the weirder things is that when you learn a totally unrelated language, you oftentimes have some gaps and some struggles, but you don't have to worry about the interference as much.
Yes.
Using a word that may not exist because you think it's a cognate, you can sort of like, you know, um, Lucify or Hispanify or whatever your vocab and kind of be understood, like Portugnol.
Hmm.
Um, but then that can cause some issues, right? Like where you do it incorrectly, or maybe that word doesn't actually exist. You give a theoretical form of a word, but no native speaker actually would use that word.
Yes, exactly. But I'm excited to see, hopefully my goal is by next May, I'll be comfortably at a C1 in all four domains of, speaking, reading, writing, listening. And I can move on to something else since there'll be my 2-year anniversary with Refold. Well, doing the Refold method, let me say that.
This is exciting. I look forward to seeing your further progress. It's very rewarding.
Yes, I agree. When I started Refold for French last May, I didn't expect for my French to be where it is now. So I'm really excited. You can't really see your growth while you're going through it, but going back reading, things that you struggle with, and you're like, this is a breeze. Why was I struggling with this? It's an amazing feeling.
I tell you, it's very interesting. So when I first came into Filipino, I was an early outputter, and I actually had a Discord account from like 2017 or something where I was outputting. And I don't remember the sign in information now, but I did find it out. Like I did get into the account like a year ago, just out of curiosity. And it was very interesting seeing how bad my Filipino was in 2017 versus 2023. And um, you don't necessarily have that same thing if you're not doing early output, right? You don't have this sort of written record of your bad output. But I think going back and like rereading things and being like, oh, this was difficult for me a year ago, and now I understand it fine. Or I think that's a great sort of metric for seeing your improvement.
Yes, yes. And I think the language learning community doesn't do a good job, in my opinion, of letting people know, like, hey, every 6 months or so, go back and read something that you struggle with to, help motivate yourself. I think we need to do that for each other more often because a lot of people really struggle for months and months and they don't feel as if they don't progress and end up falling off of the repo program or just stop language learning altogether. And this is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. So, the longer you're with the language, the better you will be with it. But you need to go back and always, do kind of a check-in to see, how you're doing. And I think the best way to do that is to go back and, read something, or if you're not a big reader, go back and listen to something that you struggled with, 3 to 6 months ago to actually see and feel your improvement.
Sure. I think going back and checking is important. And I would agree. The community, we don't do enough of that.
Mhm.
Now, you did very well on the vocab test. If you were still in coaching, I would tell you you're ready for the stage 3 transition. You should be doing output. So what are your plans for output? Are you going to just keep inputting and inputting and inputting, or are you like making friends on like Hello Talk or Tandem, or what are your plans for output?
So yeah, I started outputting maybe a couple of months ago, like seriously outputting. I started a Tandem account, and I've been talking with people on Tandem. Unfortunately, when I first started, a lot of people just instantly switched to English because that's what they wanted to practice. But Bree gave me a little hint by finding the people who have a very low English. Um, I'm not gonna say rating, but their level of English is very low. Um, so it's hard for them to switch over to English. And I talked to those people, and that's been very enjoyable because it's forcing me to kind of really understand and use a lot of slang that I don't find in my books that I read. And also, I have a subscription with Lingo Culture, which is similar to Baselang. Well, they're owned by the same company, where you get unlimited French lessons for a certain amount of month. So I take 3 classes with a tutor a week to practice my output. So I've been trying to
Okay, so you
really
have been
drum it up.
outputting.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
yeah, you jogged my memory. I seem to recall you having a friend who you enjoyed talking to that you met on Tandem a few months ago. Have you kept up with her?
Yes, yes. And she's actually coming to the States in November. She's going to be here for 6 months. So we're going to meet up when she's over here.
That's great. I actually had a roommate once who I met on uh it was like a pre-Tandem thing. I think the app was called Speaky. We had talked for like a year, and eventually we met up, and then we even moved in together for a while. Um, so I think it's hard to do when your only common interest is language. So you have to find friends, right? Not language partners, people who you actually
Yes,
vibe with.
yes. I agree. I agree. And I would say uh, that, building up that rapport takes a long time, especially at the very beginning where you feel as it's very transactional, like, let's speak in French for 30 minutes or, whatever target language in 30 minutes. Then we can speak in English another 30 minutes and switch back and forth. But once you build a rapport, it doesn't feel like a transaction because your language switching actually becomes natural because you have a friendship with that person. It's like, certain expressions you just feel as if it's better in a certain language. So you say in that language, but then you may switch back to the target language or stay in, English or whatever. So for all those who are listening, I know at first working with people on Hello Talk or Tandem may be a struggle, but continue doing it and building a rapport, then it will become a natural kind of relationship and language exchange down the road.
Yeah, it's difficult. It takes some people skills, and you have to vibe. How is so? What's the name of the service you're using? It's sort of like Baselang for Spanish, but for French.
Yes, it's called Lingo Culture.
Okay. And it's sort of like a gym membership thing, right? Where you get like unlimited access for a period of a month. You don't pay per class. How is that going? How is sort of talking to somebody 3 times a week?
So when I first started lingo culture, it took me a long time to find the tutors that I liked. I had to go through a lot to see who I really vibed with. But now I have my two kind of tutors that I meet with on a weekly basis, and it's been great. I have great relationships with them, and I'll be in Europe actually in about 2 months, and one of them is actually going to fly to Barcelona to meet up with me. So I think it's going great. I would say
I
my
like to
anxiety
hear
is
how
always through the roof. Oh,
I
I'm
like
sorry.
to
What were
hear
you
how
saying?
you've made all of these connections with Refold. You've met up with other Refolders, and you're going to be meeting up with like your language exchange partner, some of your tutors. That's interesting. So even as active as you are on the alumni server, right, there's all this Sal lore that I did not know.
Yeah, a lot of people learn languages for different reasons. For me, I learn languages to interact with people and to, understand other cultures. So I'm always about let me build a rapport and a friendship with a person, just not view them as a person who's helping me on this journey. I know some refolders, they're just interested in, consuming content, and that's why they decide to study language, and that's completely fine. But I do think my goals lend me to want to interact with people more and have people to interact with me as much as possible.
For sure. I think there's a pretty like even split for immersion learners. Half the people get into it because they just like the media. The other half get into it because they want to speak, but they think the best way to do it is to go through immersion.
Hmm.
And I think those two different learner archetypes have very different goals um, for their language, right? There are people who live in a house in the middle of nowhere in, I don't know, Montana, who their only goal for Japanese is to be able to read manga and watch anime, and that's totally fine. But other
Yes,
people have goals where they want to talk and they want to actually use the language in a sort of an outputty type way.
yes. And I would just say, make the program yours to achieve your goals. Um, I didn't know I was ready to output. This was the first time, you told me that you think I'm like ready for output, but I just one day decided to try outputting. I was like, why not? Let me interact with the person. And I do think it has helped me and my French overall.
Oh yeah, for sure. Output's great. This sort of weird paradox with immersion learners that like I don't want to sound haughty. We're better language learners than other language learners because we're doing it the right way. That sounds haughty. It sounds bad, but at the same time, there's this really sort of this streak of output anxiety that runs through the community. I'm not ready. I'm going to make mistakes. It's not perfect. So it's sort of this paradox where like a lot of people have a really good command of their language in theory, but then they're afraid to actually use it.
Yes, yes.
Where on the flip side, you get people who do Duolingo for 5 minutes a day and they go and they butcher the language as soon as they're done with their lesson for the day. Um, so it's sort of weird, right? Because like the people who in theory should be the ones who are outputting are the ones who are afraid to do it.
Yes, yes. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. It's fine to make mistakes. You'll grow, you'll learn from it.
Yeah. Perfection is definitely the enemy of good enough.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's exciting. With French, do you have any plans to like visit Francophone Africa or anything like that? I know that your main interest is sort of in France proper, right? You know, your the Olympics, your company. Um,
Yeah, so I definitely, ever since I started taking classes on lingual culture, I've been very interested in Algeria. All of the teachers are from Algeria. So that's Francophone Africa. That's a Francophone African country that I'm really interested in visiting. Um, of course, France. I want to visit French Guyana in South America and just dibble and dabble in different places. Like, although I'm really focused on France right now, I just feel as if that's just the hub for French language and culture right now. But once I get comfortable, I definitely want to explore other areas in other countries who use French on a regular basis.
For sure. And there's nothing wrong with focusing on France.
Oh
That's
yeah, no, not at
totally
all.
valid, right? Uh, People who are learning Korean, right? They're focusing usually on South Korea. They're not like, oh, I want to get into North Korean content, right? Um, so, uh, but it's definitely, again, fun for me to kind of explore language variation, right? I think some of the largest French-speaking cities are actually in Africa.
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's more French speakers outside of Africa. I mean, outside of France than they are in France. And I was just reading one article the other day that because of the population growth in Africa, with the predicted population growth in Africa over the next couple of decades, that French may be the most spoken language in the world, and it will likely surpass Mandarin, which I found very, very interesting.
That's not super surprising. I've also heard the situation is similar for Portuguese. Angola and Mozambique have a very high birth rate.
Hmm.
And I think here within the next 100 years, most Portuguese speakers are no longer going to be Brazilian, but they're going to be African.
Yeah.
So French is another one of those languages. People don't think really, I don't think it occurs to most people how international French is, but
Yes.
huge swaths of Africa um, use the language.
Hmm. Big portions from Cameroon up to the northern part of Africa, like
Yeah, I've got
Morocco,
a
Algeria.
I've got a brother-in-law who is an African French speaker from Mali. So he's got his native sort of ethnic language. He's a Bambara. It's like a Mande group, a Mande language. But I think he and my sister speak French with each other.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. So uh, I don't know. I'm definitely a big fan of like the lesser. I don't want to say lesser learned, but lesser focused on. Right? People don't think about African French as much as they do France French, which again is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but there's interesting people out there outside of some of the main areas when it comes to things like Spanish, French, so on and so forth.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
Have you had a chance to get much into African content? So one of my favorite things with Portuguese, there's a Portuguese channel, Patria Minha, and he is just he's African and he shows the way of life. Like the electricity is prepaid. Um, Everything is prepaid, like going and loading things and seeing him hunt and forage. And he's like a seamstress. He like makes dresses. So like seeing him like go to markets and like get everything and set up his workstation. That's really interesting to me, more so than it was watching Brazilians be, because like Brazil is still, pretty an economically advanced country, right? Like they're not the richest
Mhm.
country in the world, but it's not such a huge difference in way of life.
Yes.
So, yeah, Sal, before we go,
Hmm.
what would you say to the listeners? I know that we have to cut it a little early, and my internet was not the best. I apologize. So, I do thank you for coming on. But before we go, what is your word of wisdom, your parting advice for the listeners?
I would say my the biggest advice I have is be consistent. I think that's the most important thing. Be consistent. Those hours will add up over time. Just give yourself time. Just be consistent.
One sec
Hello.
here.
Oh,
I dropped. Could you say that one more time? What's your parting advice for us?
oh, my parting advice is to be consistent. The hours will add up.
For sure.
Enjoy yourself and be consistent.
Consistency over intensity should be the mantra, I think, of a lot of people.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
All right, Sal, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great episode. It was good to catch up. I've not talked to you in months, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, yes, we will.
All right.
All right.
Bye,
Have a
guys.
good. Bye.
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join to chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at Clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.